It's been my experience that there are no bad teams, just bad leaders. This video is about how to help you find and empower leaders to lead high-performing teams. My name is Cort Brady, and I've built dozens of teams through multiple companies that I've started and scaled. And my mission is to help you find and build great leaders that will run your business so you can focus on working on your business instead of in it. The purpose of any leader is to help a team or a person move from point A to point B. So from current situation to ideal situation. The value that's offered by that coach or that leader is determined by the speed in which you help get somebody from point A to point B. So the first thing to start with is you have to determine as the leader what the current situation is and what the ideal situation is. And then you need to make sure that the ideal situation that exists for the company overlaps with the ideal situation for the employee. So I generally found myself in this situation where I had been the leader managing the team and I needed to replace myself. The thought was, who do I replace myself with? Do I bring somebody internally and promote them up, or do I find somebody external and bring them in? Either way, I knew I was stuck unless I could find somebody to replace me, because the business couldn't grow with all of my time being spent leading a team. The first thing I would figure out is what's the current state of the team. The two things that I would look at is performance. So how are they doing on their key performance indicators? How are you delivering against deadlines for clients? And the second thing I would look at is the culture. I would have 3 to 5 core values that we live as a company, and I would examine every single person in that team and see how they're living those core values. Once you have that current state worked out, you can then say, okay, what is the ideal state? Do I just need somebody to keep this team status quo, or do I need somebody to level up the team? Once you've identified where you want to go and what level up the team looks like in terms of performance and core values, then you can go about crafting who you're going to recruit. So let's assume that you actually want your team to improve in a couple of different performance metrics that you're either hitting but want to improve, or you're underperforming and need to get up to benchmark. And let's also say that you have some struggles with core values in the team and the culture needs some work. The first step I would take is to build a scorecard for the ideal candidate. Step one is I would start with the mission, and I would write this out, and I do write this out for every single hire that I make. The mission is what you hope that person will accomplish in that role. And it can be as simple as the mission of the leader of this team is to take this metric from its current state here to this future state here within X amount of days. The next step is to go through all of the metrics, not just the main ones that you want improved. So this would be desired outcomes. And for desired outcomes, you go through the same format that we talked about in the mission. So you'd say, I want this metric from point A to point B in this amount of time. I want this metric from point A to point B in this amount of time. If it's a sales role, I want to increase revenue from X to Y in Z amount of time. After you've listed out what the mission of the role is and all the desired outcomes, I would then go into the core competencies that include the core values of this person. So you may need them to understand your CRM. You may need them to have Excel skills. You may also need them to have a certain amount of experience leading and managing people. You may need them to have some soft skills, empathy, radical candor. We'll talk about those things. So once you're extremely clear on what you want this person to do, I would build a scorecard. I'd start with the mission. It's the overall of what you want them to accomplish. I would then look at all of the core competencies, the hard skills and the soft skills that this person needs to be a high performer in your role. So after you have their technical skills and you have their soft skills, you also need to look at some of the harder skills, but may not be tech focused. Do they need to have a knowledge of supply chain? Do they need to have a knowledge of accounting? Do they need to have knowledge of how sales go through a funnel and how to create that funnel? Once you have those categories created, where you have the mission, metrics that you want to take from X to Y in Z amount of time, and you have those competencies created, then it's time to start looking for the candidate. After building the scorecard, then you can start asking yourself, is this an internal hire, or is this somebody that we're bringing external? One of the biggest mistakes that I've made and I see other leaders make is they see a high performer on their team and they say, man, that's the person that needs to fill this role. What often happens is you have somebody that's incredibly good at sales. That might not mean that they're an incredibly good manager and amazing at helping other people get sales. And so they promote that person and they just screw themselves, because now you have this salesperson who's no longer getting sales because they're trying to lead people, so your sales go down, and they're not a great leader, so the sales of their teammates go down. This also happens a ton with creatives. If you have a software developer, they're your top performer and push out tons of great code for you, and you think, man, they should be managing the team, then you lose your top performing software developer, and sometimes the performance of the team goes down. So the way to avoid this is to find somebody that, yes, they have to be a top performer, but they also have to want the position that you have for them. It's always a mistake to want something for somebody else more than they want it for themselves. The process that I would take is to open this position up to everyone in your company. It allows them to feel like they can grow within the organization, and also open it up externally. That way they know that they're not just a shoo-in because they worked for the company, but they're actually the very best candidate of everyone available for that job. If they do get selected for the role, it's also going to help you find the very best candidate. There's an entire process on how to interview a person. There's lots of books written about it. One of my favorite books is a book called And there's a book called Who that I love that goes through an entire interview process. And I'll create another video that talks about the questions to ask, how you see patterns, and how you select the right person. The biggest thing that I would say throughout the interview process though, is that if that person, you come away from the interview and they are not a heck yeah, then they're a no. I've made so many mistakes of just hiring somebody that I thought was pretty good, and 9 times out of 10, they end up not being the right fit, and you have to rehire for the position 3 or 6 months later, which often just turns into more headaches for you. The same thing happens if you get through interview number 2 and that second candidate is a heck yeah. Don't do the rest of the interviews, just hire that person on the spot to take a position. Once you have the ideal candidate selected, which you'll do by creating a ton of clarity on what you need and then interviewing a ton of people and only hiring the person that is a heck yeah, you've done 90% of the work. The last 10% comes from training your people on these 4 things. The first is aligned loyalty. You actually don't want your people to be loyal to their manager. And that sounds super, super odd. But the reason for this is as your company grows, you can't afford to have the risk in your business that everyone in the organization is loyal to a person. Because if that person leaves, all of their people are going to leave with them. So you need to train your people to create loyalty to the direction of the business and the core value and the mission and vision of that business. That's best done by helping them talk through who their first team is. If you ask your managers who their first team is, they'll often say, it's my people. I need to protect my people and give them the very best experience. You need to reframe that so that their first team is the leadership team. It's them and all of their other managers that they're working with. The other reason this is so important is because the business performs as a whole. And so you need operations on the same page as sales, on the same page as finance, on the same page as technology. The second thing that I train all of my managers on is radical candor. There's this desire by all of us to be liked. What happens is we often lose the respect of our people, which causes them to dislike us because you can't like anybody that you don't respect. The way this generally shows up is that managers don't keep their team members accountable. They're unkind to a team member, and kindness is a core value, or if they show up late and it's important that they're on time and you don't bring it up, you don't give feedback, they're going to lose respect for you. And oftentimes the reason that managers don't give feedback is because they have this desire to be liked by their people, but it's impossible to like somebody that you don't actually respect. The way to get around this is to not make it personal and have a deep concern for them. Hey, you showed up late today, is everything okay? That's a totally fair question, and it helps your people know that you're genuinely concerned about them. And they'll give you an answer of, yeah, I just hit traffic, or whatever the answer is. Totally get it, it's important that you're on time. Can you be on time tomorrow? That question, that conversation, although it's slightly uncomfortable, solves so many problems down the road. So be respected first, and then you will be liked. The third thing that I train my people on is that they still need to perform. So while the top performer is not always the right fit for the manager always needs to be one of the top performers. So if you are in a sales role or a software development role, the leader still needs to be closing their own deals and pushing out code. It's almost always held to be true that the team will hit 80% of the output that the leader hits. The last one is extreme ownership. If the manager is always complaining that sales is getting bad deals and as operations they can't handle it, then that team is going to have that same mentality and it's just gonna be poison for the team. If the manager says, here's what we can do, here's the ownership that we can take, here's how we can satisfy our clients, here's how we can talk to sales, then their team's gonna have that same type of mentality. So with a holistic look on everything we've discussed, the purpose of a leader is to move a person or a team from current state to their ideal state as quickly as possible. Your first step before you do anything is to get clarity on exactly what you need in that role. If you're the CEO, if you're head of operations, think of yourself as the chief clarity officer. Forget what your title is. When it comes to hiring, you have to figure out where is the team at now and where do you want them to get. Once you have that clarity, you'll be able to build a scorecard of exactly what you need. The mistake that people make is recruiting their top performer to fill that role. Don't fall into that trap. Once you've found the best candidate, which has to be a heck yeah or they're a no, 4 things you need to do to empower them is to align their loyalty with their first team, which is the leaders in the company, not to their team members. Second is to develop radical candor, which is the ability for them to care deeply about their people, but also challenge them directly. Third is you still need to be a top performer. Don't let your people think that just because they're in a leadership position, they don't need to also carry their own weight. Their team is gonna perform at 80% of the output they produce. And then lastly is extreme ownership. They need to think like a business owner. If they take ownership, then that will distill all the way through their team, and you'll have a team of high performers who are thinking with an owner's mindset. If you like the content in the video, like and subscribe. You can also check out the channel where we go in depth on how to build high performing teams so that you can spend your time working on the business while your teams run the business.